oui, oui, d'accord. Oui, 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 ça va. Oui, d'accord. Oui, eh bien, merci.
Welcome, dear guests, dear friends. We are honored that you have an interest in our meeting today. We, the Socialists and Democrats Group, have invited you to a discussion about the new social media at the service of a progressive agenda. Let me welcome, first of all, our distinguished guest. We are very honored to welcome Ricken Patel today here in the European Parliament. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all what you are doing. You and Avaaz, you are standing for the biggest online community in the world, and we praise your activities. We, the Socialists and Democrats, would like to help forward a democratic audience, a democratic communication in Europe, but not only. And this is a good occasion to get into a deeper debate today of how doing that. Let me also introduce Joseph Weidenholzer, my colleague from the group. Vice President Joseph Weidenholzer has decided years and years ago to commit his work to this progressive agenda and to the question in which way we can promote also our social democratic activities in these very important years. Jean-Luc Verheyen, who is sitting in between, is a committed advisor in our group. He is also an activist of Avaaz, if I may say so, and he is not stopping bringing us together whenever he can, and we appreciate that. Let me perhaps explain why we are doing that. We, the Socialists and Democrats, our social democratic family here in the European Parliament. There are people out who say collective action is dead. There are people out who say progressive social movements are dead. This is not our belief. We think that times are changing. We think that we are living in an era of huge transformation when it comes to technologies, climate change, social challenges, economic divides, migration. So the challenges of our days are very complex, but we firmly believe that people can give an answer to that. People can be ready to reformulate progressive alternatives. There is no need in the book of history that we, the people, fall victim to the big data and to the big money. There is always an alternative in political life, in private life, and the more we stick together, the more we are energetic about modern types of collective action, the easier it is to overcome hurdles, to overcome restrictions. This is the reason why we started 1 year ago to renovate our political narratives. We do not talk anymore about economy if we do not talk about the environment. We do not talk about the environment if we do not talk about labor and the employment. And we talk about the social dimension of this environmental challenge we are in. So we need to have a more complex, a more holistic, progressive agenda. This is what we are working on. And in the core of all of this are the people. We have to listen, we have to understand, we have to learn, and we have to communicate. This is what can make us strong. This is our experience. And insofar, Ricken Patel, we are allies. We are allies, and I only can underline today that we welcome here in this house Ricken Patel, the Avaaz community. Many of you coming from the Avaaz community, you are the game changers of our times. Thanks for your interest, and now I hand over to Joseph.
Thank you, Udo. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here, and we are still waiting for people dropping in because it's the security arrangements of the Parliament are, of course, a little bit difficult, and so you have to know that this is sometimes a bit difficult. We had already a meeting with Ricken in our group today, and I think, as Udo Bullmann said, it is very important to develop new ideas about communicating. We as politicians, we are kind of cut off of sometimes reality if we are not in election campaign where we are really exposed. It is sometimes difficult to really have access to your voters. Even if you are very active, you still lack connection. It is even more difficult on European level than it is on national level, because you are commuting between the capital, whatever, or the seat of the European Parliament and the respective member states. Nevertheless, it is very important to know these problems and to be self-critic about this. We also faced very dramatic events in the Brexit and in the Trump elections, where we could see that it is not anymore about communication. It's not anymore about exchanging arguments or evaluating arguments. Actually, the principle of democracy is that someone has an argument, another one, and then you exchange the positions, and then you evaluate, and then you come to another position. Yeah? This political process at the very moment is in danger, because we are now confronted with an attack of fake news, of people who just want to occupy the public space and run their own business. I say business. They just want to do their things, and they are misusing the instruments, the institutions, and this is the situation where we are in. It was a very good discussion we already had in the group, and I think it's, of course, for us important as Socialists and Democrats, but I would also wish that you would also have contact with other political groups, because we share the same problems, that we know what's going on, that we know that for the first time in history, the European project is in danger. It is really at stake because of all these developments. There is interference from outside. There is interference from inside on the base of completely false assumptions. So we have to reconquer and to regain this public sphere again. The first time I came across with your organization was during the ACTA campaign, yeah? I think this was, I don't know, 11 or 12, yeah? Yeah. And this is actually the first time where we could achieve a change, because it was then at this time already more or less accepted that this censorship would happen, yeah? All over the places. And it was the involvement of citizens which changed the minds, the discussion, the mindset of discussions here in the House. I remember it was on the 3rd floor, and we were handed over, I don't know, 1 million signatures, something, and it really made a difference. And from this time, I think Avaaz was always present in this House with different campaigns. Of course, some colleagues in different committees have different experiences, but I think every one of us was at least 5-6 times confronted with your input. And this is good, and this really made a difference. So I would say to discuss about new instrument on campaigning, this is a very important thing, because on European level you cannot meet every week in Brussels. You cannot travel to Brussels every week. You cannot demonstrate every week here on the Place Luxembourg. So we need another instrument, and this was actually, I would say, your machine, yeah? Because it was something very effective. People got involved and pushed us in many cases in the right direction. So this is important, this is very useful, and we could also discuss how we could change it and we could improve it. But there are also other aspects we should discuss. And I think one of the things which are really more and more important is the question of checking the truth. Or as Ricken said in our group, he said he wanted to have a GDPR for democracy. So we have to be concerned about what is the truth, how we can actually make people knowing that people are lying all the time, how we can involve states, authorities to take down fake accounts, for instance. There are some member states already developments like in Germany, like in France, in the Czech Republic, as far as I know. In other countries, there is no awareness at all of these problems. And to be very blunt, I think the Commission is also not knowing what they are doing. So the European Commission should really be much more active and clear on this. They are not. But this is, on the political level, a very important problem to be solved. And we really need your help and your assistance. And I think there is a lot of space for engaging with various means in bringing about the truth. So we really hope that we could together develop tools which are effective, which are democratic, which are on the base of reality. But our citizens deserve to know the truth. If we talk on migration, there's a lot of symbols being used in the political debate. There are heads of states coming to Brussels and talking nonsense, yeah, because they do not have the facts. Nobody wants to talk anymore on facts, on numbers, on reality. We just talk on fantasies, yeah? And these fantasies are being produced by the net, yeah? So we have to be conscious about this. And who can be conscious? It cannot be machines. If you talk to Facebook on this very podium, 2 days ago we had a hearing on Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. When you talk to these guys, yeah, they tell us we can use machines, and machines can identify fakes. Yeah, this may be true, but this is not the only. There's another side also. It needs the involvement of humans, of politically active, aware people who start to get engaged. So this is a very important point, I think. Then we discussed also, third point today in the group, there are some things we have to celebrate together as Europeans. There is no European space in that sense, because everybody is sitting at home on his tele or on his computer and looking at different things, but there is no European, pan-European kind of feeling, emotions, sharing of emotions, of positive things. And I believe this would be also an important thing to be discussed. How can we contribute to this? Because if we come to this point that we detect that we have so many things in common, we are full of happiness and joy, and we like this very much. But we never actually have the chance, because it's so difficult. If you are younger and going on Interrail, you may share this experience. But if you are in your working life, you normally don't have this chance. So let's create a kind of space where we can celebrate those things. We cannot do that every day, but I mean, today, for instance, is a day, 30 years ago, nearly 30 years ago, on this very day, the heads of state the foreign ministers of Austria and Hungary cut through the Iron Curtain. 30 years later, we are building up new fences. So let's share this, for instance, this kind of information together. Yeah? So we can do a lot along this. 2 more points. One point is we are dependent on media. And this media, for instance, in the case of the United Kingdom, they are owned by people who have their own mission, yeah? And who are not interested in informing us, so they are interested in campaigning. Yeah? And Brexit was happening because of these press moguls who had an interest or had a passion or had a lunatic idea that they wanted to destroy Europe or to make Britain exciting the European Union again. Yeah? We need interference. We need people who are actually bridging these different media segments and sharing information and making people known that there are other realities. If you are just in one reality, you never come out of this bubble of Daily Mirror or whatever this is. Yeah? So, first point, cross-cutting these media monopolies. And the last point, it is also important, as I said at the beginning, we are sometimes away from our electorate. We are here flooded with work, and you are elected on a ticket, of course, but if you get involved in your everyday work, and the work of European parliamentarians is very intensive and it's very, very effective because we really can influence the process. We can really make the difference. So everything which comes to us from the Commission leaves this House completely changed. So our work is really substantial. But again, the problem is connection. And I think we could also try to think about instruments where we can involve people like you. You are interested to being active via internet, via this technology, that we also try to connect us with our electorate. And for instance, if you are amending reports, it could also be interesting to develop a tool where we actually are directly connected with our electorate or with people who want to elect us, and then involving them in our work, it would improve the quality. And it would also be an alternative to this other idea of plebiscitarian democracy, that you just if you come to the position that these chambers cannot decide anymore, then you go for a referendum, for a plebiscite. We know what happens if you have to break down to yes or no. The Brexit is a result of this. There was a complex thing, and it wasn't just to be decided with yes or no. So if we have this involvement, if we start to create, start a process of discussing how we can be connected and how we can really also improve the quality of our work, this would also be, I think, a big advantage. So there are a lot of very interesting inputs for us, and I really hope that this kind of dialogue could start this, because we cannot stay as we are. We have to change ourselves, and we have to change the quality of democracy in order that democracy can survive. So thank you very much for your attention, for your activities, and looking forward for an intensive discussion. I have to leave for something like 20 minutes, and I will come back, but this is a problem sometimes in this house, that many things are running parallel, but as soon as I'm finished the other thing, I will be back here. So thank you very much.
My turn? All right. All right, hello. Nice to see you all. I'm sitting here, and this is actually, believe it or not, despite all of Avaaz's work with the European Parliament, my first week ever in this building. So I am discovering it. If it's your first time here too, we're discovering it together. Yours too, first time, all right. And as I sit here, one of the things I think about is my wife and I have this practice that we do before, we try to do it every night before bed, we don't always get there, but of a gratitude, where we just think about what we're grateful for that day. And as I'm sitting here, it's a wonderful thing. It's really good for sleep, and even better than don't go to bed angry is go to bed grateful, I think. And I'm sitting here thinking about Europe and the way in which on so many Avaaz campaigns, Europe has been our best hope and often our last hope. When we had a global treaty going through that would allow corporations to censor the internet, corporations to make decisions about censoring the internet, it died in this building. That's what you were talking about. It died here. When we discovered that there were potentially carcinogenic effects of a substance that was in all of our blood, of glyphosate, we set up urine tests outside this building to show that it's in all of our blood. And it wasn't, the studies of that potential risk was not backed by independent science. It was industry, questionable science. It was this body that pushed back and said, we're not going to renew indefinitely that license. We're going to put it on a trial. We're going to make sure we have independent science on it. When we went shopping to find one government institution anywhere in the world that would stand up to Saudi Arabian money and say, the carnage you are wreaking in Yemen has to have consequences, it was this body alone that passed a resolution on an arms embargo on Saudi Arabia based on the horror of what's happening in Yemen right now. So I'm sitting here just feeling grateful. And that's Europe writ large, because it's not this body, it's European citizens, it's people who campaigned, who got active, it's European institutions, it's European media that wasn't so bad that you couldn't get any of this stuff through. And so my suggestion is, I would like to have a conversation with you, and I'd like to go on a bit of a journey together today. And maybe we might begin, just try it, taking 10, 15 seconds and think about if there's anything that first comes to your mind that makes you grateful for Europe, for what it is. Should we try that? Sound good? Okay, let's do it. Just take 10, 15. Okay, how many people had success? How many people hit something that they felt grateful for in Europe? All right, everybody. Mine was really subtle. It was just that I love the quality of European discussion. The public education is very high here, and the quality of the discussion is very high. And there's a sensitive, values-based discussion that goes on when you try and engage in anything that I really respect and love. About working and campaigning in Europe. Does anybody else want to share their gratitude for Europe? Yes. You might have to hit that little button in front of you. I think it should work, the red one. Nope, there's none?
You can use the mic.
Yeah.
The quality of life and the history. Europe is full of history, all these decennias before. And we have a lot of knowledge. We are not the only country, not the only continent in the world, but we have a lot of good things. And suddenly, I won't say who, but people come to Europe, lobbies, companies, and then say, you should do work that way. And finally, when I used to be a stewardess for Sabina, I travel now in other worlds, and I see that the service we gave and the quality we gave and all the diversity of all European countries has nothing to compare with some other places. I'm talking about countries with with a good economy and so on. So I want to keep that quality of life, and not only for Europe, but for everywhere, but I don't want to lose it, because if we lose that, I wonder what will remain.
How many people share that gratitude for Europe that was just expressed? If you could hear it. All right, great, wonderful. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm grateful that we have made an ideology of peace after like the last big war. Generally, we try to see differences as a richness and just to solve things through peace, not to war, most of the time.
That's a big one. How many people share that one? All right. I think that's a good place to begin. Thank you for those beautiful gratitudes. And I also want to ask, how many people here are on the Avaaz mailing list? How many people receive Avaaz emails? Okay, great. So the first thing I need to tell you about me is that you're my boss. And I'm speaking to you as my boss. And you're a good boss. And I've appreciated working for you and serving you these last 10 years. And you've got a lot of wisdom. Because the way Avaaz works, me and my team, the staff team, don't decide what Avaaz does and doesn't do. We have the power of suggestion to you. And in scientific processes that go to 10 or 20,000 randomly chosen Avaaz members, you decide what we do and what we don't do. And it's been an honor. And I've learned a lot from you. So thank you for who you are. The second thing about me is that I am a European. I'm Canadian, but like many of us, I have multiple identities. I spent a quarter of my adult life in Europe. I love Europe. I love the idea of it. I love what it stands for. And Brexit feels like somebody cutting off a piece of my body, because this is a British passport. So I'm a European for another several months, and I'd like to keep it longer, and we'll fight for that. But when I come to you now and speak to you about Europe, it's about fighting for it and fighting for what I believe in. And the third thing about me that I'd like to tell you is that I have a son, and he's at the back of the room over there. He's having fun pulling on Rosie's hair. That's a picture of him in sheer joy, watching some other kids play. And I can't stop thinking about him since he was born. You know, my dad was pushing me for 20 years saying, do financial planning, and I just like, what's financial planning? I don't think about that stuff. And I can't stop thinking now about whether I'm saving enough for his future. And there are things that I realize as I think about that I've taken for granted, that we live in a society of rights and responsibilities in a liberal democracy that protects people. It's about the force of law, not the law of force. I've taken that for granted. I never thought I would question whether he would grow up in a world that's governed by those principles. But I'm questioning it now, seriously, sincerely. And that's the space I want to speak to you from right now, is that sincere concern about the threat that exists and what we do about it. Because there's an election coming. Elections are often times of choice, and they shape our culture, and they shape our overall sense of where we're headed and where we're going. And in May 2019, there will be an election to decide who sits in this body, and whether the people who stood up to ACTA and who passed that resolution on the Saudis and who stopped glyphosate, whether those people will stay here, or whether an entirely new group of people are going to come in here. People who traffic in hate and in smears. People who want to tear everything we've built down. That's what's at stake. And I want to get to that point, and I want to win that for our people and for this vision and for everything that we hold grateful and dear about Europe. So here's how I think we do it. Number one, I think we fight for Europe. There's a bit of like a confidence complex. I find that Europeans don't, you know, if you think about Americans, I lived in New York for a while, and everybody sits in New York and goes, you're the man, no, you're the man, you know, and it's very bragging and kind of forward, and Europeans are more careful about things like that. They don't like to brag. But I think that's hurting us a little bit in terms of how confidently positive we are about Europe, about what it's achieved. There is much to do. We'll get to that. But to go out there and fight for Europe, because the truth is, these populists that everybody keeps talking about, how popular are they? This 86% of the German people voted against the far right. Why does that fringe 14% get to be called the populists? We feel like Avaaz is populist. By definition, our mission is democratic. We campaign when over a majority of the population supports something. That's our discipline. We're by definition populist. We're standing with a large majority of people. And the shocking fact is that if you look at the Eurobarometer polling, it's constantly released, constantly tracking views in Europe, Europeans love Europe. They trust Europe more than they trust their national governments. They feel more represented by Europe than they do by their national governments. That's a fact. I know it's shocking because you'll never hear it from the news media because they love to cover the bomb throwers and the extremists and the haters. But the truth is we are much more united as Europe than we think. Citizens are in this together. And one of the examples that I have of this is, the next point that I want to make, which is that if we confidently step up and fight for Europe, we do so not just by talking about all the beautiful stories about what Europe has done in our lives and what it has achieved for us, the European project, but also what we can do next. We can lead with vision. And then there we found a tremendous alignment of European citizens about where we go next. So if I were to change to our people's plan, we just did a poll last week. This is a scientific opinion poll, 1,000 citizens, each country, Italy, Germany, Spain, France. And you can see there that solving migration together, overwhelming support on a shared joint asylum policy, fairly sharing refugees, and a Marshall Plan for Africa, going to the root causes of these things and the conflict and the devastation and solving it there, leaving no one behind, easing austerity. I mean, it's astonishing that a price is paid for economic and structural reform, and they cut spending on hospitals and schools, when in places like Greece and other countries, there is massive and widespread tax evasion. I mean, how can it be that they go first to hospitals and schools before they go to the billionaires who need to pay their back taxes? It's outrageous, and that's where we lead Europe to the next stage. Ensuring minimum wages, taxing large companies fairly, closing those tax havens, defending democracy, and a positive vision of how we protect our environment. So I won't go through each of these, or we can do it in the discussion, but what this says as a whole is that Europe is not only united as people about what we have built together, but where we go next and how we make it stronger. And that's the opportunity, to not just fight for Europe and say, no, it's a good thing and we need to protect it, but to say, this is where we're going, guys. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. We've got a lot of hate on the other side of the equation. We need to come with love and hope and vision for where we go next. Migration is the one issue that the far right has. You can find opinion polls. You can see ours sort of talking about the things that people are united on. But you can also find opinion polls where people are concerned about the levels of migration. And I feel that a lot of people who are not the far right have tread carefully around this issue, have not said anything clear that people can understand. They've been afraid of sounding racist if they talk about borders. And it's territory that I feel that Europeans have heard very strong voices from one side of the equation and not as strong or clear a voice from the other. And I do feel we can't avoid this issue as we go into this cycle. This is what they're going to be hammering us with every day. And I feel, and I offer it up for discussion, that we can defend refugees' welcome proudly. These are human beings, amazing human beings who've been through hell to get here. And it is international law that we accept them. It's something we've signed up to worldwide. So refugees welcome, and they're fairly shared. Migrants are another story. Migrants are people seeking a better life, and they deserve respect, and many of them have been through hell too. They deserve respect, and they deserve support. But every community has a right to decide who comes into their country. Every town can set planning permissions. And it's okay, it's not racist to say we'll have a border around Europe, and there will be criteria for accepting people and not accepting people. And it's having a border around Europe that will allow us to have a borderless Europe within. That's important. And I feel that if we take positions like this on the tough issues, the stuff that isn't easy, we can give people a feeling of control. because I think that people have the sense on migration, some have the sense that they've lost control of the destiny of their societies, their communities, their countries. And we have to articulate that they do have control, and here are the values and the bases on which we're going to base it. So that's lead with vision. One is fight for Europe, one is lead with vision. But even if we do all that, even if the next elections come, and we do both of those things, it really doesn't matter if a big chunk of the electorate believes that most European politicians are part of a pedophile ring. You know, I mean, honestly, like that they're raping little children. Like that is the kind of belief that can go viral, that can go around, or that they believe that they're all corrupt. They're all liars. They're all in the pay of some corrupt service. We lose across the board. And this is the last piece that I really want to speak to, which is how we drain the swamp of disinformation. How many people immediately recognize that whole threat, the threat of disinformation to democracy? How many people feel like, yeah, I'm on that, I'm across it? Not so many. Okay. Let me, with respect, speak to you about that. Because from where I sit, this is the fundamental threat to everything we love right now. To give you an example, democracy stands or falls on information. Voters vote on the information they have, right? Brazil last year, the 10 most shared, the 10 biggest true news stories and the 10 biggest fake news stories. You put them side by side. The 10 biggest fake ones were more seen, more shared, and more believed than the 10 biggest true ones. So at the top level, and most of us don't hold that many facts in our mind at any given time, we are moving to a world where people believe things that are more false than true. In taking Europe as an example, the NATO Secretary General has said that Europe is experiencing the largest hybrid warfare attack in the history of humankind. Hybrid warfare is their term for it. It's the way in which the Russian government has decided that they have gone off the rails in terms of their participation in the international system. They've invaded and occupied Ukraine. They call for beating of gays in the streets. They've stolen their own country blind, $200 billion. They've brutalized their own people from Chechnya to beyond. They've backed brutal dictators from Libya to Syria. And they drug their athletes and actually been suspended from the Olympics. Russia does not want to be part of the liberal democratic rules-based order. And for that, they've been sanctioned. But their response is, we're coming for your democracies. We're going to take them down. They said the CIA did this to us in Ukraine with their color revolutions. We're going to do it to you now, country by country. And they did it in the United States. What we're seeing is that just 6 Russian accounts on Facebook, just 6. They have hundreds, maybe thousands. Just 6 of them that we've managed to research and profile through a gap that Facebook somehow managed to, it was an opening that somebody exploited to study it. One of these accounts, for example, is the Black Lives Matter Facebook page, except it's not the Black Lives Matter Facebook page. It's the Russian Black Lives Matter Facebook page. It's the one they created to be fake Black Lives Matter. It has more followers than the real Black Lives Matter Facebook page. So these 6 accounts reached 340 million impressions. That means they generated things that were seen 340 million times. That Russian influence operation reached 1/2 of the American electorate in an election year. When you think about American elections, it's fought very tightly over sort of 1 or 2% of the vote. The Russians blasted a huge part of the population with ridiculous stuff. They said that Donald Trump endorsed, or the Pope, who a lot of people respect the Pope in America as well, he endorsed Donald Trump. That's not true. That's not even remotely true. But people believed it. Conservatives believed it. Liberals believed it. Everybody believed it. A high percentage of people that saw that post believed it. That's the shocking thing about our weakness for disinformation. And they are coming. They came into France. They came to Germany. They came for Italy. And they are dismantling. Brexit was driven by these operations. 40,000 active Russian Twitter accounts targeting Brexit. This is the attack we're under. And it is deep because Russia is teaming up with an axis of autocrats across the world. We're seeing India slip into autocracy. From Turkey to Philippines, we're seeing brutal autocrats take power. In Brazil, a man who wants to go back to military dictatorship is leading in the polls. It's a shocking threat to this order that we've all trusted. And now we've lost the American executive branch to this attack. So the United States is not an ally on any of this stuff. The last hope, the last defender, the last great power to defend liberal democracy in the world today is Europe. And it's splintering. Italy is no longer on board. So the core of Europe is where I am coming and where I believe we as citizens need to come to fight back, to make a stand for the world that we've built. And there are very specific ways to do it. It's actually relatively easy to cut this stuff out. And I got to tell you, I've been going around this building, meeting with people who do have some idea of what is going on. Even at NATO, they understand what's going on. And there are very easy ways to address it. Like before Macron's election in France, the French security services went to Facebook and they said, we've identified these 40,000 accounts that are Russian disinformation engine accounts. They're driving all this stuff through. Facebook verified it and deleted them. And that, I believe, is one of the reasons why Macron was able to be successful, why we didn't have a stronger far-right showing in the French election. Merkel in Germany did the same thing. But Renzi in Italy didn't do it. No other country, to my knowledge, has done it. The United States certainly hasn't done it. A very simple fix. And then a broader fix by which we have protections and legal protections as citizens. Now, we have to be careful about this, right? Because if governments come in and start legislating, that's fake, that's not. Who's to say these guys don't come into government and start telling, start being political, having a ministry of truth? And that's why we have to get this right. And one of the ways I think we get it right is we make sure that fake accounts don't have any rights to free speech. Facebook knows who the fake accounts are. It's against their user policy. They should just delete them. It doesn't harm anybody's speech to delete fake accounts or bots that are operating. We should just delete them. Very simple. And we should have, if the governments won't act, legislation like a GDPR. GDPR is the privacy law that why you have to click on every website now and say, like, yes, I accept cookies. That's because of the GDPR law. Why don't we have that for democracy? Why don't we have that makes sure we have verified identities? So that's the third thing I think we need to do if we want to stand up and save democracy, is drain the swamp of disinformation, otherwise we lose. Those are the three things that I come to you as my boss, that I feel like we need to do. I really am keen to hear your feedback and to have a discussion about it. And I think the last thing I will say is it's so easy to get lost in the debates and the difficulties of doing something or the complexities of an issue. But this is real. This is serious. We didn't see Brexit coming. We didn't see Trump coming. No, people thought it was a joke. And something bigger is coming for Europe. And we have to take it seriously now. And the reason I'm passionate about that is about my son, is about the world he lives in. That it's a world of justice and rights and democracy and freedom and all the things we are grateful for about this place. And if we stand up and fight for it now, it's not too late if we fight for it now. These elections could be a turning point, not a bloodbath for the far right, but a turning point where we embrace hope and love and all of the promise of what we built together and all that we can build. We'll make these guys a blip in history. We'll learn from them, and we'll grow out stronger. That's what I think we need to do. And I'm honored to join you in that fight. And I want to have a beautiful, honest conversation with you now about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ricken. It's fantastic to listen to you. And you are so right that we share a dream together in Europe. We always have to remember, and as a father myself, I know how important it is to stand up for your children in a time where many of us are very concerned about the future, even the imminent future, of what will happen to our democracy, to our liberal world order, to our way of life, to our respect of each other as human beings, basically. There are so many forces in our societies that want to bring us apart, in our local community, in our national community, in our European community, in our global community. And I think for me it's fundamental that when human beings are the best, we are together. And when we are the strongest, we are together when we face the big challenges together. So I think we can have a great discussion now, and I'm opening up the floor for comments and questions to you. and then I'll try to steer it as good as I can until my colleague Joe is back. So please, the floor is open. You just mark and just say your name and then come with your question or comments. Yes, the gentleman right there. With the microphone, please.
You hit the button in front of your mic.
Yes, I will.
And just lean into
Yes.
it. Yeah.
So I agree that here in Brussels and Europe is the best place
Could
to
you say
talk.
your name first?
Yes, Jean-Jacques.
Okay.
My Germaud, that's my name.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. So I agree that's here the best place to discuss. But I don't agree when you say every land in Europe is free. For me, Greece is not free now because they have too much to pay for Europe. Too much. They still live in misery in Greece. Hungary is the same for me, and so on. So I don't agree about that every land in Europe is at the same place. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So
I agree. Yeah. Please, the lady over there in the back, please.
Me? Yeah. I do find the language, your discourse, a little divisive, actually. For example, the previous speaker next to you who's disappeared said something like, everybody's lying. You're talking about this wave of hatred. You're talking about, the threat to Europe. And I find that this kind of discourse is exactly the same sort of discourse that we have in the media in general. And I'd like to see that kind of, I'd like a little bit more care on that. Right, so divisive, you've mentioned Brexit and Trump, and the message I take is that it's all because of misinformation that this has happened, or largely because of misinformation. And the same with the Macron thing, that you've put, what's her name, firmly in the extreme right camp and all this kind of stuff. This is very divisive. And Le Pen, thank you, half the population of France voted for Le Pen. And it's rather insulting to say that all these people are just being led by the nose by manipulators. In my experience, in my political life, I found that socialists tell as many lies as everybody else. So enough of the dividing people into the good on the left and the evil on the right. It's not helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought of like, wow, if we're very divisive, how much do we play into these divisive and hateful and demonizing narratives that push people away? And I think this is a common thing. I feel it myself. I think a lot of us who care for hope and love feel it. And there is a dance to be danced there, I think, because I really do feel that, this is the argument that comes in at the level of European diplomats about Russia. That Putin is moving militarily and democratically against these countries, but they don't want to create a combative, conflictive atmosphere with Putin. That's been the Germans are much more towards that direction. Social Democrats, actually, this political grouping is much more in that direction often. And I think that while I respect that, and I share it a lot of the time, there's a point where you have to say, it's time to, with respect and understanding and intelligently, not demonizing, but understanding where they're coming from, you have to stand up and draw a line and say, no, we're going to stand for these principles. We're going to fight on these principles. And I hear you. I don't think that fake news is the only thing behind Trump or behind any of these. I think that Russian disinformation and the disinformation campaigners, both domestic and foreign, are incredibly sophisticated at playing on existing things. So, for example, there's a lot of fear around migration. And I believe if you had accurate information about, for example, the amount of crime that migrants commit, that fear would be lessened. But if 4 out of 5 stories you see is this immigrant killed that person, and this immigrant killed that person, this immigrant killed this little girl, and da-da-da, and that's what your Facebook is showing you, and that's what your media is showing you, decent people start to move to have views that I find we cannot accommodate in a tolerant democracy. And that's where I feel like I'm not demonizing the people. I'm demonizing the manipulators and the structures that are using the oldest con in the book, the scapegoat con, you know? Those people are responsible for all your problems. They're the reason you can't get the paycheck. They're the reason why the economy isn't doing better. We have to stand up to that. And with respect and love for all people, fight for that.
So just quickly, some statistics are actually true. You don't have to, pretend all the bad statistics are false or don't exist. It's all right. There is an increase in crime in some countries with an increase in migration, immigration, etc. That's all right. That's a fact. Deal with it. You don't have to say, oh, they're all bloody liars. They're all trying to get rid of immigrants and all the rest of it. No. We're much more reasonable than that, Well,
totally aligned. Fact-based discussion about it. Yes.
Yeah. I also want, concerning Trump, for example, to me, he's more like a symptom of a problem than the problem itself. The policies that led to the election of Trump is the policies we need to change. Yeah. And of course, we should fight Trump when he does something outrageous. He does it all the time. But I think it's better if we want a success in the longer run. We also need to fight the root causes for why people can elect Trump. And some of it is economic inequality, loss of feeling of control in your life, over your salaries, over your children's future, a lot of pressure on the way of life in many parts of our societies that we don't really recognize. And I think policymakers should address that, and thereby also taking out the fuel for these xenophobic, nationalistic movements we see around. Anyway, I've seen many fingers. I think you, the young guy, gentleman there.
Yeah, hello. My name is Till Eichler. I have 2 questions. First off, I was quite surprised about the, rather simple explanation. So you said when we can control the cyber armies of Russia and we get a better grip on Facebook, we could actually solve a lot of the problems we have nowadays. Is that, just for clarification, whether this is the right direction you're pointing to? And then another question, I really appreciate how positive and how optimistic you are actually here and presenting the fight, and I think that's very, very crucial. I personally often it's so complex, and you just stop thinking about how you can improve things because you feel like there's no start and no end to all the problems. So maybe you could elaborate a bit on how you personally deal with, as you daily deal with all the problems, and the daily there are people probably bringing their causes to you and saying, this is a problem, this is a problem. So how do you deal with that? You mentioned this gratitude thing you do in the evening. That's very interesting already. But is there maybe also, on a bigger scale, policy-wise, do you think it's important to stay optimistic and not to focus too much on problems, while not being naive, of course, but how do you deal with that? So these 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's how do you don't get overwhelmed with all the complexity and difficulty of the challenges we're up against? My feeling about that is that it's about a choice to hope, and for me, it's rooted in my understanding of where we're at and where we've been. The world as a whole is doing, I know this is shocking, is doing extraordinarily well. We are on an exponential curve of progress on any metric you want to choose to look at, whether it's spread of democracy. For the first time in human history, we have more than half the humanity under a democratic government, whether it's literacy, the empowerment of women, LGBTQ2 rights, GDP per capita, poverty reduction. We're on track to eliminate poverty globally in this generation. This has been with us since the dawn of time. This is extraordinary things we're doing. There's only one metric on which we are failing, and that is environmental. That we are achieving a lot of this at the expense of the resources of our planet and approaching planetary boundaries. But even on that, I find a lot of reason for hope. You know, in 1970s when Greenpeace got going on the environment, they were fringe lefties that nobody took seriously. They couldn't even get a meeting with anybody. Now you have national security advisors and militaries targeting environmental, because they recognize that the environment is everything. It's our existence. It's our survival. That is coming into the mainstream now, and that gives me reason for hope. I see all kinds of evidence. You know, when we first started arguing for the idea of a 100% clean energy world, the idea of a world beyond fossil fuels, it's about 5 years ago. We started to, and my friends took me aside and said, Ricken, you know, this sounds a little, I don't know if anybody's going to believe this is possible. I don't think this is a good idea. And then, in the Paris Climate Agreement, every nation in the world adopted that goal and sent a signal to markets that worked overnight that investment in fossil fuels tanked overnight. That's the kind of, so I guess I see a ton of stories of hope. And that helps me to feel not in a sense of being drowned by all of it, but a sense of opportunity to say, where can we make the most difference now? And that's what I recommend to you, is just looking at all the things that are in front of you and saying, what's going to make the most difference? And then just be happy to work on that. I also have the discipline that I can put a lot of things out to you, and then you say, this one, not this one, not this one, and that's what my boss kind of makes those decisions. So that is a very helpful thing that I have. To your point about, does solving fake news solve all the problems? No, not at all. You know, like, I feel like this disinformation campaigning fake news thing, it's a couple years old. The world was far from perfect a couple of years ago. We're just going to go back to there. And I think, you know, a couple of years ago, the idea of neo-fascists getting a significant percent of the vote was like, it wasn't really on any of our radar, right? You wouldn't have thought that was possible. It's only become possible because of this dynamic. And that's where I think that will disappear substantially. Not entirely, because things have begun. A lot of people are believing things now. They believe that tens of thousands of European women have been raped by Muslims, and the liberal authorities have conspired to cover it up, you know? That kind of belief is out there, and that generates a radicalized politics of identity and exclusion. Those kinds of stories have gone viral. But I think it will radically walk back once we address the disinformation problem.
Yeah, thank you so much. And who was the next one? Okay, I thought it was somewhere. Oh, you have been before, so I will just take this woman, please.
My name is Marina Juan. I've been an Avaaz member for 10 years. And in a former life, I was also a member of this political group staff, also for 10 years. So I'm doubly happy to be here. I just want to take this opportunity to give us a little update on your situation with Monsanto, because, of course, because you are carrying the voice of so many people, you also put yourself sometimes in tricky legal situations. So I would like to know what are the ways you can protect yourselves so that you can carry on, and what is the precise situation now with Bayer Monsanto?
So on Monsanto, the judge has decided to hear oral arguments, and I believe September 6th or September 9th is when we will be in court with Monsanto in New York. That's the jurisdiction they sued us in, New York State. But looking at the briefs, because each side filed different briefs with the judge before that, and just if you don't know the background, Monsanto has subpoenaed us for all communications going back many, many years that have any mention of them, which is an extraordinary amount of information. It would take us hundreds of thousands of dollars just to comply with that request. And they would see everything, all of our strategies, all of our internal, they particularly went after communications between us and any political actor and the European, because we were going after their cash cow, this glyphosate, this operative ingredient in Roundup, which is this massive, world's largest pesticide. But the one happy update I'll give you is I've been watching the briefs. Avaaz members just rallied wonderfully and donated a very large amount to fight. Thank you. To fight that. And so we went to like the best trial lawyer in the United States who came from a background that was friendly to us. You know, he tends to take on good causes. And we were able to hire him. And in the briefs that are going back and forth with the judge, I feel like he's cleaning Monsanto's clock. Like, he's absolutely savaging them in terms of like even doing investigations and finding that things they're claiming aren't right and that actually they had all kinds of legal ways to do what they were doing that they didn't, and this is actually just victimization. And if I were the judge, I would throw this out of court. So we'll see in September. But thanks to you guys, I think we've got them. I feel very strong about that case. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, gentleman here, please.
Thank you. I'd like to know your views. Sorry, I'm Adrian. I'm here from Belgium. I'm a teacher. I'm very interested in the work you do with Avaaz. From the start, I was always wondering how is this possible? All these messages, what's hiding behind all that? Is there some kind of special interest? So far, I haven't been able to find any. So that's good for you. My question doesn't relate to that. I was thinking specifically about wealth concentration in the world, and I was thinking how can we fight as a community against the concentration of wealth amongst fewer and fewer people? I think a number of us are familiar with this study that was released by Oxfam recently that shows that 8 people now, which is a ridiculously low amount, and it's getting smaller, yes. 8 people now own half of the world's wealth, which seems astonishing. I hear the hopeful messages that you're telling to us about how poverty is being eradicated slowly in the world and people are getting out of it. But how is that possible when? Well, how can we get to the end of this fight to eradicate poverty when the system allows de facto monopolies to exist, or wealth to be concentrated in so few hands? How can we work against that and to make a fairer wealth distribution happen?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Everybody heard that? 8 people have as much wealth as half the planet. And that even just, I remember that when Oxfam started that report, it was 400 people had as much wealth as half the planet. Now it's down to 8 and shrinking. I mean, what happens when we get to the day when one person has as much wealth as half the planet? I mean, I've seen analyses of like the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, that sort of tipped when the wealth got so concentrated at just a couple of people. That's just completely unsustainable. What we do about it, I think what we do is democracy. I think when people make decisions about everything, about social benefits, about where austerity happens, about whether you crack down on tax evasion, about there's a million different policy decisions that affect whether the very rich get richer or whether the benefits of growth are spread more evenly. And in jurisdictions where, like the United States, where I feel the United States is under a level of state failure, the legislature has been captured by corporations, by lobbyists who are legally able to buy elections. It's legal. What's mostly illegal in a lot of countries, to just give a politician a lot of money, unlimited amounts of money, is legal in the United States. And I think that is the problem we need to fix. And to speak to the earlier point about, you see, I think, Americans responding to that and saying, this system's rigged and we want a better system. And you have the Bernie Sanders answer, which is the ultra-rich have rigged it for the ultra-rich. And you have the Donald Trump answer, which is it's Mexicans and immigrants. And which one is right? There's a truth to that, Have Mexicans stolen a lot of jobs or have they actually sustained growth and sustained the American economy? And that's where I feel like we need to not fall for the scapegoat con job and embrace a politics that puts people back in charge and takes corporate capture of democracy and moves it back into democratic place. And that's a big task in the United States and in many countries.
Thank you. So we have one.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I had the same question also than this professor. I was wondering who was behind this Avaaz institution, because it's already an institution. My question is very pragmatic. I have wanted to donate several times for different causes, and I have already donate for this huge campaign you did on plastic in the sea, and I'm very concerned about environmental issues. But I am very reluctant to pay via the computer. So I have tried to pass the message several times to your organization. Please provide with a bank account or provide with something so that we can also, or any kind of other ways of payment, so that we can do some transfers differently. So that would be my best wish. So, and thank you very much for all your projects and what you're doing, because you are kind of acting as a whistleblower and an alert on what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we should have that available, and you should get an answer that says, if you want to do a direct transfer, this is how you can do it. So if you give me your email address, I can follow up and check to make sure you get that answer. But thank you. A couple of you said, who's behind Avaaz? What's behind this thing? And I want to just speak to that briefly, because ever since we started engaging on advocating for the rights of Syrian citizens, Avaaz has been one of the first kind of large-scale targets of the Russian disinformation machine. It's easy, just Google Avaaz, and you'll find a bunch of stuff from very, good-sounding websites, globalresearch.ca, and kind of things that sound really great. And then Google the source, and you'll see things that say we're a CIA stooge, and we've never run a campaign criticizing American foreign policy. Patently false. You guys know we've campaigned against the Iraq War, against Gitmo, in favor of Edward Snowden. Just campaign after campaign, we've been clashing with the U.S. government as much as we have with any government on the world, if not more. But these fake news articles say that we're a stooge of George Soros, which is their favorite criticism. That's also a great example of fake news, because it's like, Soros is a philanthropist who funds literally every good organization you've heard of, like, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, gay rights, civil rights, just about everything that's good that's happening in democracy. Soros's money, because he's given away 2/3 of his wealth. It's an extraordinary amount of his wealth that he's given away to these causes. And that's why the far right hates him, and they spin out all of these stories. And yes, he did give, his foundation, not him, gave a small grant to one of our co-founding organizations. We had a few co-founding organizations when we first got kicked off. And since then, since our first year and a half, we're 100% funded by small online donations. We don't take money from governments, corporations, from large donors. We have a 5,000 euro maximum limit. Like, this is the cleanest money on the planet. But if you look at the people criticizing us, they're like Breitbart, who's owned by the Mercer family, the billionaires who bankrolled Trump. It's Russian state stuff. It's like, just Google, if you ever see these criticisms of Avaaz, just Google and research the source that's saying it, and you begin to get a window into how the disinformation campaign works. But you will see a lot of people will just share this stuff without ever checking that. And that's part of what has given us a window into how the machine works.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carlo. I'm a young professional from Italy here in Brussels. I wanted to ask you, in your analysis, where does the element of trust is? Where is it, and how do you think we can rebuild it? I mean, people stop trusting, the usual, stop trusting institutions, government, news channels, the classic, the usual papers, the national papers, I don't know. Many of the usual suspects lost the trust of the public. And as you said, it's all about perception. We are lucky enough to be able to see the greater picture of humanity, which, it's going into the right direction, but many don't. And this is about perception. So people lost the trust, and this is why they believe different. They lock themselves into their bubbles, and they believe, this was the case of Italy, everything they don't tell you is true. This has been the sentence that has been floating around for a few years. So how do you think we can rebuild the trust of the public and rebuild the trust they put in the classical actors?
Yeah, the Russians have not been too careful about, they've got tens of thousands of people working in these troll farms, and night and day, they run 24-hour shifts, pretending to be a housewife in Pennsylvania, or a German industrial worker. And you can interview them. You can see on public interviews with the people who've done it. And they have manuals for what they're after, what they're trying to get done. And their number one goal, they don't just back the far right, they back the far left as well, almost equally. They were as much behind a lot of like Jill Stein, for example, the Green Party candidate in the US, as they were backing Trump. Why are they doing that? And their manual says the way you weaken a society is through weakening the bonds of trust. If you destroy people's trust in any and every institution, you can't trust the media. You can't trust politicians. You can't trust any NGOs. Well, who can you trust then? It's destroying it so that you break it down so that non-rules-based actors can flourish. People who lie with abandon can flourish. That is their game plan. And it's an old game plan. The CIA was using this this is part of the Russian narrative. It's like, the Americans have been doing this for a long time. And it's true. The CIA has been doing this in societies since the 1950s. But it works. And so to your question, a hard question, now that a lot of trust has been destroyed, how do we rebuild it? And I think part of it is we need to get smarter as citizens about the trust wars. We have to be very careful, have a cultural shift where rather than withdrawing trust the first time we hear a negative thing about someone or something, saying, let me check the source on that. Those guys say Avaaz is a criminal organization. I haven't seen that myself. Let me check who's saying that and why they might be saying it. There's like a level of which I feel that part of the reason the world is accelerating exponentially is that democracy is working. More and more people are being brought into power and agency and able to shape our world. But with power comes responsibility. It really does rest on our shoulders, citizen by citizen, the direction that our country takes. We can no longer just trust the elites to take care of it. It's on us now because we have real power. We can upend the elites in one election. And we have to exercise that power wisely. So that kind of cultural shift about the wisdom with which we exercise our power, I know it's a big lift, but I feel like we have to do that. And we have to get smarter about media literacy and who we can trust amongst the media and who we can't. I feel like that's the main direction, but it is a big slog to do it. Do you have any ideas about that?
I don't know, can you hear me? In Italy, I am part of this project that is called Trust in Progress. A report will be coming out next September, and part of it is still very small, but part of it is to try and map those who generate trust. Not even going at too high of a level. When you go at a local level, we run this survey, which we use to write the report. And when you ask people who is, in your opinion, who generates trust? Who are those trust generators? And everybody has its own. Those who say my wife, those who say Matteo Renzi, some people answer that. But a lot of people have, they say, they don't refer necessarily to people, they refer to places. So it's very interesting, and I think it would be very interesting to do that on a national level, on a global level, because eventually we can then, global gatekeepers, call them however, or trust generators. It would be interesting to see how that can evolve.
That is interesting. And I also feel like storytelling, like political storytelling, like my understanding is that the Five Star Movement, and Five Star Movement is the most popular political party amongst Avaaz members in Italy. So I'm not, there's a lot of good things that they're fighting for, basic income and things like that. But they've also been quite linked to the fake news operations in the country. And so at the same time, you have a political party that's rising and championing people, but spreading a ton of lies about their political enemies. And I feel that people should know that that's the case. And that helps to create accountability around that stuff. But I think it's a really interesting project, and I agree with you that it'd be great to explore.
Thank you.
You're in the front row.
Yeah, my name is Natalie. I'm from Brussels. I work in communication. So you kind of answered the question, but I wanted to say, as you mentioned the different ways governments and institutions could fight fake news and disinformation, but how can we as information consumers, what are the different steps we need to take to fight that? And the second question would be, you kind of answered also, like Russia seems to be very active at the moment with disinformation and manipulation. But probably they're not the only ones. You mentioned the CIA. Who else? Or, I mean, due to the technology that we have today, of course, pushes the use of these tools. What are the different threats, or where are they coming from, or where could they be coming from?
Yeah, they're coming, well, the Russians account for a big portion of it in many places, but it has generated a cottage industry. So many people know about the Macedonian teenagers. Like during the US election, a series of young people in Macedonia saw all this fake news going incredibly viral and started writing it and actually got really good at it. And they made a lot of money from generating completely false stories that Americans ate up. So you have a commercial branch of this that's been operating and growing. You've also seen people respond in kind. In Brazil, the far right has definitely pushed, Bolsonaro as candidate has pushed the fake news more than anybody else, but the other political parties have decided to fight back in kind. So now you've got a reasonable amount of fake news coming from progressives and from the left in Brazil. And I think there are different state actors that are involved, but no state actor, and what I can see, anywhere near what the Russians are doing. They're just taking it to and I really would say they are sophisticated. Like, I feel like Avaaz, we try to be state-of-the-art at this stuff. You know, we try to really understand what kind of messages are resonating, where they're resonating, how to advance a campaign, and they are cleaning our clocks. Like when they had the migration summit on Sunday, there was a picture of a fence being torn down by a lot of scary-looking men. And every time you have a migration issue, the Russians deploy that. So a Russian disinformation network deployed that picture saying, this was the German border yesterday. Truth is, there's almost no migrants coming across the German border right now. Literally, no, there's like 4 in the last week. Like, there's no one coming across. But the Russians put this picture of the border is being collapsed by all these scary people. And they say it was yesterday. And then they use Facebook. They use the advertising, and they generate 40,000 impressions, not just anywhere. They target the regions of Germany where Merkel is still popular. So that's very surgical. That, oh, Merkel's declined in Bavaria and everything, but here she's still got strength. Let's hit her there. And we're just sitting here going like, holy mackerel, these guys are good, you know? And that's where I really feel we have to wake up, because the rest of us, Europe as a whole, Russia has tens of thousands of people doing this. Europe as a whole, to my knowledge, has 3 people working full-time, just tracking what the Russians are doing. It's called East Stratcom Task Force. You should go to their website, eu-disinfo.org.com. You should really check it out. 3 people. It's astonishing. We're just rolling over and letting it happen. That's the urgency I want to bring to you. What do we do?
You wanted to one.
First question I asked.
Yeah, first question is, what do we do as people to address this?
Just,
And I think, number one, you know, like democracy, the power is spreading. My dad sends me fake news every single day, almost, you know? And me and my family and my sister, we tried to do an intervention, and we're like, Dad, like, here's the email you sent, and here's the fact check of it, and please be responsible in what you're sharing with people. This information hurts people. It's costing lives, and we engage. And I think it's up to all of us to be more aware of what our friends and family networks are spreading, and to engage respectfully and in a fact-based way, and often in a way that I think you have to go to the emotions. I had to say to my dad, like, Dad, like, some of my best friends and the most beautiful people I admire in this world are Muslim, like, and you're saying this about them, and it's not true. And it was only when I went personal that I found that he really started to shift his view. If I tried to talk facts to him, he's not that interested in it, you know? And so I feel we are uniquely capable. The truth is, these splits go through our families, you know, and through our communities. And that puts us on the front line of our ability to engage with them and heal the hate and the wounds that are being spread right now.
Okay. Thank you. I have now back, and then the 2 in the front, yeah? Yeah, please, go on.
My name is Laura Litopoulos. I'm half Belgian, half Greek, and most of the time once a month I go and travel to Greece. and I see what's going on in Greece. There's nothing to compare, and what you hear in the news in North Europe and what's happening there has nothing to do. You said that you were, or you are still a Canadian, and then you went to Europe. So my question is, what is your image about Europe, about all what happened all these last years, the TTIP, the Bayer and Monsanto? The image I have as a Belgian or a European, because I'm a mix of nationalities, is that I have a feeling that there's something powerful that says to Europe, no, you just shut up. You just do what you're told. There are big lobbies putting pressures on pharmaceutical and other kind of companies. And finally, I'm sure there are people at the European Parliament who really struggle. They do their best to do the right thing they paid for. And finally, we see that we are powerless. And maybe that's why people become more nationalist and say, okay, Europe, I don't really believe we used to be a group. And when there's nothing, when something happens with TTIP, we're talking about a gas effect, the environment. We are putting some restrictions in these countries, which means that the poor cannot drive his car anymore to any city in Europe. While at the same time, in China, they don't see each other's because they have too many cars and they have so much fog. So how can we go? Because they will force, let's say, developed or rich countries to buy a car. Well, I've talked to someone, and it seems to find a suitable car. Don't forget, I need the equipment at home for an electrical car, but I need at least 25 to 30,000 euros. Today, I don't work anymore due to health problems. Do I really have 25 to 30,000 euros to buy a car to be able to be part of the environment? Why China or America? America has started again with all the charcoals. I'm sorry, I forgot many words in English, but they started again with the business of charcoal. They still go on with polluting, and finally, what does Europe? I know they do many things, but when it's up to the decision, they put pressure on Europe, and finally people say, yeah, it's okay, yeah, it's okay, we accept, but my image is not that great, and finally, I want to say as a Belgian what I do, or what is your opinion on that?
You know, when the genocide happened in Rwanda, 800,000 people killed. And the American conservatives said, the United Nations let this happen. The United Nations failed. The United Nations didn't protect. The United Nations is a useless bureaucratic organization. But who blocked the United Nations from acting? It was the United States. The rest of the UN Security Council was united in going into Rwanda. It was the United States that blocked it, because the UN is only able to act when its member states allow it to act. So I think Brussels, I think this current commission under President Juncker is too close to business. I think business has too much power. They have too much of a, well, let's let business regulate themselves. So it's not like the United States where business writes the laws and decides everything. Europe has a much better functioning government. But Juncker's administration is too close to business, but Juncker was chosen by our democratically elected national leaders, and the European Council of those leaders, the people we put in power, are not all progressive. There are many conservatives in that group. There are some that are very strongly conservative, and they are very close to business. And they are representing citizens that believe in being close to business. You know, they don't want to harm the economy. They want to be careful. And so I want to distinguish between institutions that are corrupt, like I really see the American institutions corrupt, and institutions where I think in Europe it's more that you have politics operating over these decisions, and you have a good percentage of Germans who aren't necessarily opposed to the Bayer-Monsanto merger, you know? And that's where you get into the difficulty of it. And I think that part of the challenge from a progressive perspective is to tell the stories and just say, this is how to win more people over to that perspective. And I think the key to do it, to win over your fellow citizens, is to say, it's not a threat to the economy. Most people I find who are in the center or on the right, that say, oh, let's not regulate the big corporations too much and let's not intervene too much. They're worried about their bottom line, about their jobs, about their kids' future, about all of that stuff, and that they're worried about socialists disrupting the economy. And I feel like a narrative that says, you know, crony capitalism is not good for democracy, and it's not good for capitalism either. It's not good for competition. Business should not be too captured, too close to public policy. They should be regulated in the public interest. That's good for everybody, left and right. That's the argument that I find moves the ball a little bit when it's a political decision. But I agree with you. Brussels is currently needs to be less close to business.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Do we know how many journalists are still in jail in Turkey? I'd like to know that. Do you know that? Do we know? Or there are more maybe after the weekend? I don't know.
How many Turkish people are still in jail?
No, it's journalists.
Journalists are still in jail.
In Turkish jail.
I don't know that. Does anybody know that?
I've been here for you about 8 months ago or something like that, or more. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah. We campaigned for our campaigner was jailed there for just being a human rights campaigner. And she's been released, but her trial is pending. But yeah, she was one of 60,000 people. Have I got that number right? I think it's 60,000 people that were jailed. And this is an example of Europe slipping, of the series of countries slipping into autocracy. And I will beat the drum. Like, Turkey is one of the world's capitals for fake news, for disinformation. So remember the whole Pizzagate scandal? That was that the Hillary Clinton and during the election, the Democrats had a pizza place that they organized a child sex trafficking ring out of. And it went really viral in the American right. The fake news people who studied that found that the place where it got pushed and really driven high on Twitter and Facebook was Turkey. Turkey pushed it. Why would that be? And now we see that Trump comes in and he's making all nice with Turkey and congratulates Erdogan on his dictatorship. It's like whereas Clinton was taking a hard line. And so this is the kind of things that I'm seeing operating in international and domestic politics through this weaponization of information. It's information warfare going on.
Hello, Anna Toumazou from European Women's Lobby. First, I would say that I was very amazed by your speeches because it's filled of positivity and without no hatred, and that's kind of rare today. Then I will ask you a question because so I'm working for piracy to happen in European institutions, and so we are trying to help women candidates that don't want to be candidates as there is a lot of threats on them, especially cyber harassment, etc. So there is that, and there is the fact that last year, while I was finishing my political sciences studies, I was doing a lot of cyber activism in France during presidential elections, and I kind of infiltrated far-right websites, and they were discussing together about how to impose fake news and how to explain it, etc., etc. So, as a politician or as an activist, what do you think is the best position concerning trolling and fake news? Because we got a certain amount of energy and of time, and do you think that it's better to consecrate it to just try to spread our good ideas and positivity, or we need to spend and to lose time trying to fight against people who spend their life doing this?
We have seen, there's an expression in some of our circles called "don't feed the trolls." If you feed a troll, if you respond, they just get worse. And I think this is a dynamic that the trolls are relying on right now. They know that just by speaking up in the way they do, they can silence all voices but theirs in the online discussions that we see. Comments beneath articles, chat rooms, Facebook posts, those kinds of things. And we have seen a real pattern. You know, we experimented. We were thinking about creating like a citizen army, a love army, to go out and just meet these guys wherever they were and answer them in ways that were respectful and humane and substantive. And we piloted. We had some of our staff go out and do it. And I participated. I did it too. Trying to transform, at least win the audience, you know, the people who were looking at the comments. And the vitriol, these guys went after the commenters personally. They went to your personal Facebook page. They went to your personal Twitter. They went after you personally. But they only went after our women campaigners. I said lots of assertive things with them, but they went after the women campaigners on our team. And that is fascism. I believe fascism has always been rooted in a fundamental hatred of femininity. That's its core root. It's a hyper-masculinity that hates the feminine. And I see that manifesting in this movement and in the trolls. So I don't think that, I think if we want to deal with the fake news disinformation stuff, we've got to reduce the unfair advantage these guys currently have by having Facebook delete all those fake accounts that are accelerating their messages. Because if, you know, in Avaaz, if we want to try and get something shared, if somebody has 5 of their friends share it, it goes way up in the Facebook algorithm and lots more people see it. But it's really hard as Avaaz. Maybe 5 of your friends are part of Avaaz, maybe not. So it's really hard for us to hit that threshold with everybody. What the Russians do is they've got all these fake accounts, and they're all friends with people, and they instantly like anything they put up, and it shoots up the Facebook algorithm and blasts out. So the trolls and the disinformation networks have a tremendously unfair advantage right now to drive their messages out. So I think we need to delete all of those fake accounts. It's against Facebook's user policy. And we need to correct the record. That's the second thing I would say is just, you know, what if every time a false piece of information is posted, a false link, a false article, you get, everyone who's seen it gets a warning that says, warning, this thing was false, it's been corrected by this fact-checking organization, endorsed by this media organization you trust. What an education that would be. Because actually, a good percentage of everything we're seeing on the internet right now is disinformation content. So how great would that be? Facebook currently funds the fact-checkers, which is great, although they need to be more independent. And it has them correct the record, but only with sharers, only people who are sharing the information, and only new sharers. So only people who now just choose to share the fake information after it's been corrected. That's a 1 to 0.5% of the people that have been exposed to that information. And we need to push these platforms. We need to, if they won't do this, if they won't correct the record on their platforms, we need governments to regulate them to do so. But right now, we need to push them to do it. And I really believe that the trolls that we're facing will be less, they'll be more consigned to the weird, like 4chan, everyone knows that website, 4chan, like these weird sites that are extremist sites where they used to live. They won't get as much into the mainstream to threaten us and intimidate people. That's my belief.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
Yes, I think the last thing you said was extremely interesting, and I think we should really support your preference and your priority given to fake information, because that also takes away the trust in institutions. And so I fully agree with you. But on the other hand, I read your campaigns. You have a number of campaigns where you ask people to react in the 48 hours for some vote of the European Parliament or the United Nations. How do you put a priority between those two big deals you have? The one on broad issues like fake news or world environment, on the other hand, on that specific issues. And on that last point, how do you react to those who have voted for you? Because when you say in 48 hours they will decide for or against that, people are expecting after the 48 hours to have another mail from you saying, yes, we won, or yes, we lost for this and this reason. So these are the two different things on which you definitely have to make a priority because your means are limited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for the questions. The first answer is that the way we decide is you decide. We write up both emails on whatever it is, an environmental issue or a UN issue or a fake news issue. We send them out to you, and based on your level of enthusiasm, we choose what to run with. That's most of the time, that's how we make decisions. Sometimes we get everything, you're enthusiastic about everything, and we have some discretion about what we run and what we don't. But often it's like, this one is clearly the thing that you most want to hear from us, and that's how we decide what we do. So that's what I mean about you're my boss. You decide what we do. The second thing about report backs, it's been my surprise. If I thought it was a service to you, I feel like I would be writing report backs every week. I want to write an email. Here's what happened this week, because I constantly want to tell the stories of what we're doing. But our methods of understanding what you want to receive tell us that you're more interested in receiving campaigns about things you can do to change the world than you are in receiving stories about whether we have won or lost or whatever. And so we restrict it to like once every 2 months or so, we come with here's what's happening, here were some of the victories and things, based on our understanding of what you want. Thank you.
We're coming to the end of this session. I have 2 more requests. So one in the back, the lady, and one in the middle. And then I will close the speakers list. So you want to group them or no? We do it individually, yeah? The lady.
Corinne Huyn-Kwansu, I'm a French citizen living in Brussels. About this fake news and fake accounts problem, I was wondering if we could not make it compulsory at European level for Facebook and the likes to be more active in tracking fake accounts, for instance, and make it for them a violation to keep those accounts. Because I was puzzled by what you said earlier about what happened in France and Germany with the election, when you said that the national intelligence services went to find Facebook and said, okay, we've identified those accounts and you have to delete them. Why couldn't we make it compulsory for them to do so? That would be easier and more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I don't even know that they would object. But they're hesitant because they've admitted that 13% of their accounts are fake. And we know that fake accounts are more active than real accounts. So what percentage of activity on Facebook is fake then? Probably a lot. And how does Facebook make money? It sells ads. You give them some money and they say, we showed your ad to 100,000 people. But if a minimum of 13% of the activity on Facebook is fake, then how much of that ad budget that you just gave to Facebook was spent on fake accounts? And do they want to admit that? That's the bind that Facebook's in right now, and why they're dragging their feet, even though they know this is a massive. They're decent. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of the senior executives of Facebook, and they're decent people who really screwed up and are trying to make it right. But they built something really broken, and they want to take 5 years to fix it. And we may not have our democracies in 5 years. You know, that's the challenge we're up against. So I 100% with you, and I think we should be campaigning for our governments to take urgent, immediate action on this. And there's no problem with freedom of expression with this. Fake accounts have no right to free speech, you know? So thank you for that.
Thank you. You are the last speaker.
Yeah, thank you. First.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Jags. I'm a German citizen living in Belgium. And I'm not a great Facebook fan, to be honest, but I'm hearing the words con, fake, scapegoat, and I just want to, refer to the propaganda the Nazis used in the Second World War, and I think this here is now a kind of repetition, just with other media, and this is maybe why it's reinforced, but I think you need to ask yourself, why are people so open to that? Why do they really want to hear what these fake news say? And I think you talked about basic hatred for women in another example. I think it's a basic fear of otherness, the other race, the other color, the other religion, which is always repetitive in our society, and I don't know how we want to efface it. Yeah. That's all I want to say.
Sorry, this was a misunderstanding. I wanted to take the gentleman in the row before you. So, if you also raise your question, because we have to close.
Yeah, but actually, it's good because my question went in the same vein than what this woman speaks. So, thank you. No, actually, I myself, I work in the social sector, and my name is Ludwig, and I'm very sensitive to the demonizing of people, and what this woman said rang a bell, because actually I worked just a few times with a very young man, a 13-year-old man, who was abusing people on the internet. And we as a team, we said, if we tell this young man that he has a problem, he's doing something wrong, then we will kind of do the same thing as he does. So my question is, how can we as a society, as people, at the same time stand up for what we want and our principle and put our limits on the thing we want and we don't want, and at the same time extend our compassion to the people in order not to do the same thing as they do?
Yeah, I think, this is a good, I really appreciate it. There's been, I think, 3 contributions in this vein, and it is something I think about a lot. And I want to just take it in as a challenge to do better on this front, because I keep thinking about how to do better, because campaigning language is often oppositional, and I do believe in it. The media responds to it, the public responds to it. Like I said, we test everything, and if you just say, let's make nice with everybody, it doesn't resonate as much as this is what we need to win, and these are the people that are going the other direction, and we need to overcome that opposition. Like, it's the way our brains are structured. You spoke about human nature and othering, it's the reason why the fake news people are so good at what they do is because they're doing exactly what we want them to do. They have studied us. They've studied down to psyops. They've studied our personality types, and they know how to target down to what kind of personality you are. So my feeling, where I'm at with this, is that we need to tell stories that involve conflict, that involve opposition and victory and overcoming, but always in a way that respects all people, that fights on behalf of all people, that humanizes all people, and that puts hope and love at the core of what we do. That's my belief. And if there's something in an Avaaz email that is that is demonizing or that is putting a kind of hate into it, I want to know about it. I want to try and get it out. And I know you do too. I think when we've done personality profiling of the Avaaz community, we sort of looked at it out of curiosity. We didn't design the Avaaz community that way, but now it's big, and so we just ask people, what's your psychological orientation, The 5-factor personality model is the most common model used now. It's called Ocean. And we are incredibly diverse as an Avaaz community across all measures of personality, except one. We spike on what's called agreeableness. We spike on agreeableness is defined as people's collaboration, their hopefulness, their openness, their compassion. That is what unites our community across every other barrier, every demographic, every age, every nationality. Those who care come together in this community. And I want to honor that love and hope, because I believe that's our superpower. That's how we win. And that's how we not just replicate the conflicts of the past, but transform into a new dynamic. Because the truth is, the far right is moving off of genuine issues of exclusion, of economic exclusion, of fear about control and democratic control. And they're responding to stories that I believe to be incorrect. But if we can give a true story about how we pursue freedom and justice and equality together, I believe we can transform our societies and emerge stronger than ever from this. Europe can, and the world can. And I'm honored to be in that fight with you.
So thank you very much. A big applause for you and for all of you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I think this was a very fruitful discussion, and it needs some kind of continuation. We'll think about the format, how we can have a second round of our exchange of views. I just wanted to remind you that there is, if you still are interested, and the first time here in Parliament, there's a very interesting discussion now going on in room 3G3 on powers and perils of propaganda, amongst the speakers, representatives from the International Holocaust Museum. It's a really interesting discussion. Who is interested should please follow the lady in the back. So the lady raises her hand. Yeah? She will show you the room because otherwise you may get lost in this building. So thank you very much and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for great and really fantastic questions. I started with my gratitude for Europe of just like the quality of the democracy and the discussion, and I really feel that was demonstrated here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. Paul? Yeah? Thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have to go.
Hey.